friends. So for people who are just joining, I did ask individuals to put their name and where they're from in the chat, just so we can start to welcome our new friends. I already have gotten a few new introductions in the chat, which is really lovely. And now we'll kick off. And so pretty soon you're going to hear me yelling your name. Welcome as you come onto the call. All right, next slide, please. It is my honor to introduce all of you to the Gravity Terminology Public Call. We have a new format now. You'll see this going forward. We're really trying to focus this call on terminology. There is an IG specific meeting on Wednesdays. You'll hear more about that. And then there's the pilot meeting. There's so many friends who are along to the work of terminology development here today. So we look forward to getting into that work. The reason why I say that is it used to be the meetings were it was our general community call. And so there were sometimes upwards of 200 people. So we usually have a small, like less than 50 group right now, which is really appropriate for the work that we're doing. But we do ask that you are muted upon entry and you remain muted to avoid background noise. Of course, there's so many opportunities to communicate and get your chats and thoughts into the conversation. Just know that I'm very attentive to the chat. I'm happy to stop and pause and integrate findings, and we make sure that everything in the chat is documented that needs to be an action item, and you can see some of those elements here in the conversation today. The call is always recorded. Recordings are available on the Confluence page after the meeting. And when you do put in a chat, please put it to everybody so that we can make sure that everybody sees your wisdom. Next slide, please. This is the antitrust practices slide. Gravity Project participants have the responsibility to comply fully with federal and state antitrust laws. Individuals speaking or providing written comments shall refrain from any discussion which may provide the basis for an inference that they have agreed to take any action relating to prices, services, production, and allocation of markets or any other matter having a market effect. Participants shall not discuss their pricing or others' pricing or any term that might affect pricing or fees such as costs, discounts, terms of sales, or profit margins. And adherence to these guidelines involves not only avoidance of antitrust violations, but avoidance of behavior that might be subconstrued. Thank you for the legalese. Next slide, please. We just want to honor every meeting, our amazing sponsors who help make the work go. You can see lots of both federal and private entities and colleagues across the ecosystem who help make this work possible. But special thanks to them. And there's a note in the bottom thanking the significant in-kind contributions of which AMA goes above and beyond monetary contributions, Civitas Network for Health, and Saffron Labs. And they all are very crucial to us completing the work you see here today. You can always see information regarding sponsorship on the Gravity Confluence. If you have any desire to become a sponsor, you can reach out to us. We are always trying to make sure that we can keep this really crucial ship going. So thank you so much. Next slide, please. This is the agenda. There's lots of Sarahs. There's a significant amount of our subject matter experts are not able to attend today. We have synthesized all of their information. We do have Adriana on the call. So thank you, Adriana, for being here. Most of the others are away with other conflicts today. So just noting that it will be a lot of the Sarah show, but maybe I'll be leaning on Adriana as well. So we're going to go through announcements and a project schedule and overview, then go through the updates in digital literacy and digital access concepts. This is where we're going to bring anything new to you since last time. And then some all domain updates and revisions, and then close with community homework and next steps. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. So we want to announce a few things, although we really are focusing on terminology. There's a lot going on in the ecosystem across our two other work streams, the tech work stream headed by Corey Smith of the American Medical Association, and the pilot work stream, which we co-lead with Civitas. So notably, STU 2.1 updates out. The comment is open for 2 weeks. Publications expected in late July. And we really do want to invite anyone who wants to participate in the conversations that are relevant to FHIR in the implementation guide to this public work group meetings, Wednesdays from 1 to 2. You can find any of these meetings on the HL7 calendar. And then, of course, the Connectathon in July, it's virtual. And then there's the September Connectathon working group meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. Next slide, please. We briefed these last time. I'm not going to review them again, but we do have these two relevant rules out for our work. One is the ONC NPRM, which notably includes recommendations to raise the baseline version of US CDI from V1 to V3. That includes our gravity, social determinants of health, activity value sets. So it's very relevant to our work. And so the public comments open until the 20th of June. So if you do want to get comment on that, please do. The link is going to be in the chat. And then we also just we talk a lot about privacy and consent and safety and digital justice in our work. And relevant to that is the HIPAA privacy rule notice of proposed rulemaking to support reproductive healthcare privacy, which is strengthening the privacy protections by prohibiting the use of disclosure PHI, a regulated entity for either of the following purposes, and it most notably involves reproductive justice, reproductive findings, and privacy. That comment is earlier. It closes on the 16th. Full briefings are going to be available in the chat and also on the Confluence. Again, we encourage any of our friends to submit comments on either of these. Next slide, please. I did want to give an update. As many of you know, there's the inpatient quality measure out right now, which is the screening for social drivers of health measure. There is the current screening for social drivers of health measure, which is the inpatient quality reporting measure. CMS has contracted with Yale Core to revise that measure. The public comment for that revision is out in the ecosystem. The reason why it's relevant for you is it's directly relates and references our materials that we develop here in Gravity. It is a screening intervention measure. It's focusing on food insecurity, housing instability and homelessness, transportation insecurity, and utility insecurity. It incentivizes IC10-CM documentation and very notably leverages Gravity Curated US CDI value sets. Public comment details are available at the link at the bottom. And just as a caveat, I lead this measure for Yale Core with CMS. Really hoping that everyone gives comment on this measure. I just want to note something that's very important here. You'll see that the existing measure of screening for social drivers of health includes interpersonal violence. So on revision, CMS is excluding interpersonal violence from the measure because of the USTPSF recommendations for screening for interpersonal violence and because of some of the safety considerations of screening for interpersonal violence. So it's again just focusing on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 domains at this time. Next slide, please. And then just an announcement for the grant. We talked about this last time. There's the UCSF Siren Engagement Grant. Information at the bottom link below. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. Thank you, Lucy. So here we are at the roadmap. We are in the early June, addressing in terminology, digital access, and literacy. We have a few possible things that we might be addressing before the close of the year, including expanding material hardship terms, transportation and security terms, and possible billable terms for coding for food. But those are all just proposed. The technical work stream, again, just published STU 2.1. Looking for public comment on that. There is a new use case discovery happening regarding eligibility. We really encourage you to go to those Wednesday calls from 1 to 2 to get information on that. Heading toward the CMS Connect-a-thon, and then over in pilot workstream, there's a lot going on in our partnership with Civitas, working on our 4 public health equity pilots, and just about to kickstart CBO co-design work on trying to make sure we're centering our social care voices in our deliverables. Again, this is supported by Civitas with funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So more to come on that. A lot of that work will be disseminated through the pilot work stream, but just want to make sure everyone gets an overview of what happens within Gravity. There's a lot there. Next slide, please. All right, any questions on what we've done so far, which is just a quick overview of announcements, roadmap, and activities? All right, okay, next slide, please then. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Molly Satewell, who's going to be reviewing build updates and action steps this is kind of the final frontier of our work. So if we're doing identification, as we call it, for digital access and digital literacy, the end results are the codes themselves and the value sets that they live within. Hamali?
Thanks, Sarah. Next slide, please. So we have put together a table which provides an overview of different domains and associated activities that we have been working on to update in VSAC and related terminologies. So when terminologies are released, LOINC in Feb, SINOMED and ICD-10 March, April, it usually takes 2 to 6 weeks for them to be available in VSAC. So once those are available, we go in and update all those recently released terminologies in VSAC. So this is just an overview of which different domains and activities we are currently updating in VSAC. A couple of things to notice is that some of our submissions are SINOMED International, and even though SINOMED International releases on a monthly basis and those codes are available in international, it usually takes 6 months for those to come into SINOMED US. So although we have a list ready, it is possible that some of the codes we won't be able to update for this release, but which will be updated in fall release. But it's a huge amount of work that we have done in past couple of years, and as a result we were able to submit and get out around 581 new codes which are focused on social care across multiple terminologies, and so we are in process of updating it in VSAC. We anticipate the update will be completed by end of June or mid-July, so that new updates will be published for public use. And once we publish those, I think automated notification will be sent to the ones who are registered for VSAC updates for Gravity value set. So you can update it in your systems if you are using those. So that's a quick update on terminology update. So next slide, please. So terminology is a dynamic process, building and maintaining it. So as we update existing value sets with new code, it is equally important that we maintain the existing codes and make sure that those codes are up to date. So for that, we have put together a collaboration management site using NLM's VSAC. So through that, we were able to generate a collaboration site where once the value sets are built, then we can run an update and post it on the collab site. What it does is that all the value sets that we have built and has current codes, it bounces against the most recent release of a given terminology. So whenever SINOMED update is released, LOINC update is released, so our ICD-10 update is released, it compare the code in current value set with the latest version to see if any of the codes are outdated. And if it is outdated, then it is our responsibility to go and check and see if it is an inactive code. If it is an inactive code, we if there is a replacement, we replace it. If not, then we see if there is any relevant code available. So as it is equally important that we update the existing value set, it is also important that we maintain those value sets. So this is most recent development where we were able to put together a collaboration management site where we will be maintaining this value set twice a year. So next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of how the report looks like. You can see that if on the last column where it says QA status, if there is a warning that tells us that in that value set, there is a code which is inactive or something is not right for a given value set, where then we can go and take a look at and make necessary changes. So this is just an overview of how we perform maintenance for Gravity value sets. Next slide. So when we were at HL7 Connectathon, there were a couple of questions raised on understanding, and because as we are building the terminology ecosystem for social determinants of health, the value sets are increasing, and there were questions on how can we download all the value sets at once from VSAC so that we have all the terminology which is developed for social determinants of health through Gravity, we can have it in one place. So we have put together step-by-step process on how to use VSAC to download all the value sets at once. There is a screenshot shared here, and all those details are also available on the conference page on VSAC. So if anything is confusing, we would be happy to answer the questions through email, but things are self-explanatory, and this has been an ask from the community. We were able to put together a quick guide for that. Next slide. So as we are working on digital literacy and access, and we are updating the value sets in VSAC, we are also making sure that we are building the Loink questionnaires for the domains that we have worked on in the past, for which there is not enough representation for the screening assessment. So currently we are in process of building Transportation Security Index questionnaire for submission to Loink. And there is one questionnaire currently in Loink which is referenced in employment status of Gravity clinical domain, for which there is missing Loink answer list. So we have also performed submission for that. It is important that the complete questionnaire is there with question and answer. So that is another submission we have performed for Loink. And we made social connections means to identify some critical screeners for social connections, so we can start working on those. I will pass it to Sarah to shed more light on that. Thank you.
Certainly, yeah, so it's my honor. So one of the responsibilities that we have, of course, is we take a lead on building any critical, nationally recognized, standardized instrument. We certainly cannot build every instrument, but we do have a charter to build the ones that are very, very critical for national implementation and are really practical and pragmatic for use in clinical settings. This social connection work relates directly, of course, to the U.S. Surgeon General priorities on addressing social connection. The social connection subject matter experts work very closely with the U.S. Surgeon General office, and development of a full and robust set of critical social connection instruments also relates to work to develop a social connection measure, a quality measure. Our colleagues at NCQA are on the call today. So when we met with our social connections SMEs recently, we identified really a top level need across a few different approaches that are disseminated in both research and clinical applications, and we will be taking lead on building those. Again, this is within our charter to focus on nationally disseminated standardized and representative instruments. This is in alignment with the U.S. Surgeon General focus on addressing social connection and social isolation. And this is given the likelihood of the value sets being aligned with future quality measurement. So these are the three that we're picking next. And then we'll have a pretty robust set of instruments across the social connection domain set. But just goes to show that even long after a domain is sunset, we still reconvene our TEP to make sure that our guidance on build leverages their wisdom and expertise. So thank you so much, Hamali.
Sarah?
Yes, hi, Lucy.
Hi, everybody. This is incredibly detailed staff work. I'm really just blown away that this is getting done. It's really an incredible public service so that people can actually standardize the way they report things that we would like to see reported. So thank you for that. And I have a question about social connection. Long ago, there was a questionnaire, the Syme-Berkman questionnaire or survey. Is that still current?
Yes. It is one of the, yeah. And then Kamali or
Yes.
Asha, do you want to speak to it? Because
Yes,
they're
so
so intimate with all this, they can tell you exactly the status. Yeah.
Yes, so the Berkman Science Index, we have submitted it to LOINC, and they are in process of reviewing it. And the expectation is that it will be released in the 2.73 version, which is this year, or the latest would be 2.74 version, which is next year. But we have already performed the submission for that screener to LOINC.
That's terrific. I just want to make a personal comment about that. The Berkman-Syme or Syme-Berkman came up in a conversation. I looked at it and I would just comment that that survey or any survey like it maybe should be reviewed at some point by experts for age relevance. I found looking at that survey that being an older person and being asked all those questions was going to be very misleading at times. So just let me say as a general comment that surveys about social connection, at least from my point of view, could differ in both questions and answers across the age spectrum. So maybe somebody could think about that. Thanks.
Lucy, thank you. And I do want to note that that was actually a lot of our conversation with our subject matter experts, because we have both elder and all ages subject matter experts within the TEP, our SME section. So you, as usual, put your finger on
Great.
a complexity that was discussed. And we just want to thank you. And that just gets documented through our TEP meetings, our subject matter expert meetings. And, a part of what we do within Gravity is sometimes identify work to be done, right? And one of those elements was a work to be done element. In addition, for instance, improving gender inclusiveness in intimate partner violence screening. That was a work to be done too, that we identified in our review. So sometimes the comprehensive nature of our review definitely yields those findings, and you are, of course, putting your finger on something that is very important. So thank you.
Great minds. Thank you.
And Sarah, just want to take a minute.
I know you're going to do the same thing I am. You go for
it. To give a shout out to Linda, our Linda Hyde, who had been leading the terminology efforts, and with her guidance, she helped me tremendously to onboard. And the result is that we were able to submit 500 plus SINOMED City codes to SINOMED City, and we have Kathy Richardson, a representative of SINOMED International, who is always willing to come early morning in the meetings and guide us and move things forward every week or whenever we need it. So John Snyder from SINOMED US and Kathy Richardson from SINOMED International, without all of their support, it wouldn't have been possible that we were able to build 500 plus codes in SINOMED City in such a short period of time. So thank you.
Incredibly grateful for our colleagues in the terminology standards ecosystem who are across the board very invested in this work. So thank you so much. All right, I think we're ready to move on. Next slide. Okay, here we go. So we've updated announcements. We've talked about build updates, which are getting very, very critical. And I want to personally give a nod to the terminology team that has such a meticulous process that is ever improving for maintaining value sets and master lists. It's kind of best in class. Just so grateful for their care, because it makes sure that the end results, our value sets are current and appropriate and complete. So thank you so much. Next slide. All right, so here we are, we're in the identification phase, right? So we were just talking about build phase, the green bucket, and then now we're in the identification phase with digital access and digital literacy, like starting from the very beginning, which you just got scared. Usually when I say that, I sing Sound of Music, but I'm not going to do it now. Next slide, please. All right, so we are in the concept identification phase. You can see we only have 2 more meetings where this is the focus, right? So this is the phase where we are identifying needs, filling in gaps, gleaning in instruments, assessing instruments, identifying programs. You'll hear this at the end, but it's very, very critical that if you have instruments that you feel like need to be assessed, or you have critical programs you feel like are important for these two domains, that you submit them to the subject matter experts so they can be assessed. At the end of July, we will be addressing starting the end-to-end review, and then the vote happening in August. Again, you can see homework, submitting, digital access, and digital literacy concepts go throughout. Next slide, please. Again, we talked about this last time, but just know this, so there is this, I have this graphic of how we do terminology development here, and every single one of the circles is important and valuable. So we have terminology informatics expertise, we have subject matter expertise, and we have all of you, some of you who are terminology experts as well. And we balance all this in order to ensure that we have a consensus-based, evidence-based value set together and data sets together. Our subject matter experts are all deep in the domains of digital access and digital literacy, and that really helps us make sure the validity of the terms that we're crafting is correct. They are correct, I mean. And then every time we have a meeting with the subject matter experts after this meeting, we post things to the master list. Next slide, please. We try to move things kind of logically, starting with instruments and going through definitions and diagnoses, and then from there, next slide, please. There's a few updates, right? So this slide was in process before, and now it's up to date. The Confluence is our home for our work, right? So the other home, right? So we have this live home with these meetings every other week. But if you ever want to find out the status of things, download master lists, so look up screening instruments, all that information's on the Confluence. You can see digital literacy and digital access on the right-hand side, at the left-hand side of the page. If you were to go to the Confluence site, you can find definitions there, you can find instruments there, you can download the master list. The masters, again, are posted by the Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard, the day after the public call. Once a domain is complete, the master list gets shut down, but this is where we do the work, the sandbox work of developing domains terms together. Next slide, please. And next slide. These are our amazing subject matter experts, so brilliant. We are so honored to work with them. Walter Suarez, Adriana Neva, Adriana Aguilera, Bumi Camajola, and Jorge Rodriguez. Also wise in their way, and we meet weekly in order to ensure that we're staying on target. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, digital literacy was pulled from health literacy, digital access was pulled from material hardship. Again, you're going to see this in digital literacy. We're talking about how we need to consider different aspects and skills. We did that with health literacy. And digital access, we have to consider, again, if it's not present in the environment, or if it's not present because you cannot afford it. You'll see that we've been focusing on digital literacy really deeply, right, for our first area of work. Next slide, please. Just on a note, we said this before, we're going to keep on saying it. It's really important to assess digital access prior to digital literacy. Are you able to convene? Do you have internet? And once you have it, can you use it? Next slide, please. Next slide. There's just a couple updates to digital access, because as I mentioned, we've been focusing deeply on digital literacy because of its complexity. So we have our broad digital access definition, which is reliable access to high-speed internet, broadband, and a tool to use. This is in development. It's changed a bit. That was just the one that was there before. We do have one in process, because one of our responsibilities in terminology development is to state a problem statement, right? So digital access is a statement, but a problem statement would look like inadequate digital access, right? Does not have reliable access to internet service and cannot afford the necessary technology or digital tools for access. These definitions are very, very critical when we think about semantic interoperability, because having the term also requires the definitions. So when we say something, we know exactly what we mean when we say it. So crafting definitions that really represent the specific elements of the domain are really important. And then, of course, so this is the problem statement, inadequate digital access. Again, this is in process. And then there'll be a positive statement of having it, which may be built off of the above definition or not. Any,
Sarah, are you looking for, I'm sorry.
yeah, give us comments. What do you think, Lucy?
Yeah, I'm chewing on the concept reliable access.
Mhm.
And at least two use cases occur to me. One is I have a subscription. In other words, I can afford it and I'm paying. And the other is I have to go to the library.
Mhm. Mhm.
Would going to the library be considered reliable access because libraries aren't open 24/7 or aren't open when there's bad weather or who knows what. So for that use case, I have to go to the library. It's
Mhm.
always been okay, but maybe it's not. How
Yeah,
would that be addressed here?
you know, I took out a parenthetical for the sake of this call that I perhaps should have left in. It's one of the things we're hashing out. You know, and this is, you know, Monique's on the call, so she can speak to it. Is it personal access? Is it in your home? Is it right? So these are things that we are hashing. There's a qualifier in front of the access that we're hashing out. It was just a very long parenthetical that I did not drop in here, but you absolutely, per usual, Lucy identified an area that has to be refined because, you know, there is an understanding usually that it involves, you know, access of a personal nature that would be able to be with you when you needed it, as opposed to a library that is not open when you might need it to be. I should have put a little call out there, Lucy.
Thanks.
Anything else? Any other comments on here?
Yeah, if this is Mike Klinkman.
Hi.
Hi. Your definition has a two-part or kind of two aspects,
Mhm.
but the inadequate response can be either, right?
Mhm.
Yes, it's an
So-
and or.
So does not have reliable access and or cannot afford.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. My apologies there. And you, this is the, so, and then again, Monique, brilliant Monique. For those of you. So one of the things that we are hashing out is whether this is actually two concepts, right? They're combined here, right? But, you know, we've done this in the work with transportation insecurity where we really specify, like the definition might be inclusive, but we might be able to actually specify the terms themselves because each of the different each the sub elements themselves, because each of the different sub elements require different interventions. And it's really important to build concepts that link to interventions. So in its problem statement, inadequate digital access might be a broad statement, and you can imagine two sub-statements of one, does not have reliable access to internet service, and two, cannot afford the necessary technology, digital tools for access, right? Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, and there's one more thing that I think Sue's comment in the chat brought out for me. It just goes back to what we were talking about with social isolation or social connection. There's an absolute sense of social connections that we've sort of embodied in some of the assessment instruments. But there are also people who voluntarily are satisfied with much less social connection, or in this case, no digital access. And
Right.
so I don't know how we handle in our definitions the sort of perception that it's a problem on the part of the patient or client versus some absolute standard for what it, quote, ought to be, end quote, normatively. So that's an issue. And I don't know how to address that. So I don't know if your subject matter team has given much advice about that.
Mike, we addressed that years ago when we were talking about housing.
I
Yeah.
vaguely remember this.
Yes,
And
I know. I was gonna raise that.
exactly. Okay. Okay, everybody remembers. Great.
I know. The gang's all here, right? So there are certainly, and I do want to note that this is the one we have not been working on as deeply, but there's all kinds of precedent for binding this with ways that can differentiate when it's causing a problem, when it's not causing a problem. We did this in transportation and security and in housing in the past, and in some of our material hardship concepts, I think. So yes, those we absolutely, and you know, again, all of you are pinpointing things that have come up in the subject matter expert meetings. And also, of course, I want to say the brilliant Monique is really good at highlighting these things as well. So grateful for Monique's help.
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, we could, that issue of people not wanting something, even if they don't want it, they don't have adequate digital access. In other words, you can't rely on digital access for them to make an online doctor's appointment, et cetera. If they don't want to use technology or, these services, we could probably edit this a little bit to say, and does not want or cannot afford, something along those lines. Yeah.
And then
Because I think it still poses a problem if they don't have digital access, or it may
Depending on-
pose a problem. Yeah.
Exactly. Depending on the use case, it may pose a problem, right? And I practice in rural Vermont with plenty of Luddite folks who live in the woods, who have no desire to have anything, right? They live completely off the grid, but they do not.
That's why they're there.
That's why they're there. I know, I'm surrounded by them. I love it, right? These are my people. I literally drive 45 minutes north to take care of them because that's my preference. But when it comes to telehealth in the pandemic, I could not find them, right? Because they didn't have any of the resources that I was using to contact other people, right? Or if I'm trying to find a critical, have them access the portal, they cannot be, right? So there are, we can absolutely, brilliant thoughts, so wonderful. And I think we have some work to do on this definition. And I just want to note, Lucy, I just want to, your goal when we were doing housing, the stay as I am one, right? The idea that just because you have a problem, it does not necessarily mean you want to change it, right?
Or just because you've made a choice about how to live doesn't mean that you consider it a problem, even though other
Exactly.
people might.
There you go. That's
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
way to say it.
In this case, it may be a problem for the healthcare system in trying to connect during a pandemic, but it may not be a problem for the
The person.
individual person. And
Right.
I don't know how to handle that tension if we call this a problem of Mr. Jones, when it's more a problem of Dr. Klinkman trying to connect.
Well, it
I
is
wouldn't
the
call it
social.
a problem. This is Janice. I've had my hand raised for a while.
Oh, so sorry. I can't see them. My apologies. I think I
I'm
scrolled
sorry.
down.
So
Yeah.
I just want to add a couple things here.
Yeah.
I am low income, and years ago I was at a gathering of the minds of social workers in our county, and they had just rolled out another new opportunity for for internet at a $9.95 base price, right? And we have a minimum of up and upload and download. And so I had never tried it before because I heard from so many people that it was unreliable. Well, I have it. I actually purchased it because I am low enough income. I pay $9.95 a month. I can have like 5 things on at once, right? 2 TV, like people stayed here, TVs, two or 3 computers and phones, and it works. So there's a lot of myths out there about that the low income or the discounted programs aren't efficient. I just want to say that because I was nervous to try it, and they said, well, you try it, right? My friends in digital world. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a try. And I have never changed it. So we, like where I live, we have 4 different providers, I believe. Our community technology assisted board is very strong here in King County. I mean, we live in a fairly tech reliant area, but reliable access kind of threw me off. I want to say what Lucy had mentioned, but the truth is I would consider the library reliable access in reality because people do use it. We, we have 53,000 unhoused individuals in the county I live in, and this is one of their primary, next to phones. And our state did a very good job about getting phones and data to the people. And nationally, the phone providers for low income individuals that qualify, right? The biggest thing is just getting them to the reliable access might be that they haven't re-upped their renew, when they're asked to renew or whatever, but they give away free phones and it's unlimited text. And, it's a lot of data now on them for, $0 or maybe $10 nationally. So there's a lot of opportunities, but as you mentioned, there's people that don't want them, they don't want it. And so I think that a part of the thing here, we are only talking about access overall, but a bigger issue is the fact that many jurisdictions have not opted into, the big companies or even the smaller internet or broadband providers haven't felt the need to provide the service to people. And years ago, I actually testified in our county about our local small, it was called Astound, now it's bigger, it was called Wave internet provider. I would support a small rather than the larger organizations myself. And I said, we need to have a program from you that offers comparable. So because there's 4 that offer it, I could put it in the chat. You can see what is offered. But I think today, a lot of people, more people than not, like you said, have it unless they want to be off the grid. But how it might not be considered a problem, right? It's just something that you have to know about, right? It's sort of like diabetes might be listed as a problem, but people might not look at it as a problem, right?
And I think in this particular case, inadequate digital access, to your point and Mike's, it's a finding. And Sarah always sort of emphasizes that, then there's an interaction with the patient, whether that gets promoted to their problem list and or whether there are any, patient goals around that. And it might be that there are none, that this is a satisfactory state for the patient.
This is the
thing I wanted to emphasize is the fact that those discounted programs actually work. If you maybe have 3 children that are all doing homework and gaming at once, it might not, but it is a misconception that they're not efficient.
Oh yeah,
that's good
Dennis,
to know.
Thank you so much. And I do know that from my own experience with patients that they're actually very critical and helpful. We do all of our care conferences on them. Like we do, there's a lot. So thank you so much for making the point. And Janice, thanks in general, just for making sure that the patient voice is very clear in what we're doing. And I want to just note again that part of what we do, speaking to Mike's comment and Lucy's comment and your comment, we do operate again from that Gottlieb and Aldrich lexicon, where just because it's a risk doesn't mean it's a need, right? So, and that's what Monique was referencing. So risks are things that ping through screening. Right, needs are things that patients endorse and identify that need action, right? So we just, from a patient-centered process, just want to remind everybody that that's part of our anchoring truth in our work.
I think Monique's comment is really, really helpful because people interacting with systems may know what they want and may have decided how they want to live. But systems could still make findings. And ultimately, those findings are going to make their way into research. We have found 43% of people have inadequate access to the internet, but they're happy that way. So that's a distinction I hadn't really thought about. So thanks, Monique.
Thank you, Monique, as per usual. And Michael, just thanks for your caution. Yeah, this is the part of the tension that we sit in. It makes me think about our principles as well, those 6 core principles of that we use to guide our work. Any other questions here? I think we are going to be here for a full hour and a half, so just bracing everybody. Wonderful conversation so far. So honored to be now 3 years into with relationships with many of you, and so honored to have so many new voices. Any other thoughts before we go to the next slide? All right, we already have lots of marching orders. Next slide. No updates to instruments. We still have the educational impact due to COVID-19 panel, the American Community Survey. Next slide. And the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital Digital Needs Screening Tool. Next slide. Okay. So that's digital access. Again, there's a lot of work that we hear from you needs to be done when we're considering not just the definition, but also possible additional terms to adequately meet that domain. I want to note as well that we need, we're going to be thinking, of course, in the community level drivers and the personal level drivers, right? Because again, from a rural perspective, broadband access is something that we need to make sure that we think about. Just because you have a device doesn't mean there's anything to access. Next slide. Thank you, Sue. All right, this is a big slide because this is kind of the sea of where we are with digital literacy right now. We are in the discernment process. Lots of ideas, lots of testing, lots of subject matter experts and terminology and informatics folks weighing things back and forth. The base definition, it's still like the one that we've referenced from the beginning, and this is the definition of note for digital literacy, is from the American Library Association. It's the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information requiring both cognitive and technical skills. Some of the reasons, some of the things we are thinking about as we build off of that base definition are the breadth of possibilities within that definition, right? And so one of the things that we're considering are what base digital literacy skills might there be that can affect function across multiple use cases, whether it be healthcare, social and professional communication, education, and employment, right? So digital literacy can be everything from being able to craft your own web page and set up point of sale elements from it, right? That's a high advanced skill of digital literacy, or maintenance of complicated online reporting, et cetera, to simple skills like basic skills that we know from a clinical setting and an education setting and an employment setting and a financial setting and even a civic engagement and voting setting, right, are kind of base functional social investment, right? So in the breadth of the possible definition of digital literacy, we are working on defining an inadequate basic digital literacy skills area that would help enable definition intervention across all those use cases. So part of that means that we are then curating those base skills, which is synthesizing information across, like, I think we have collated at least 7 different references now for how to structure those skills. But it's just basic things such as utilizing a computer or a device or a tablet, crafting emails and communicating via text, accessing the internet and using base applications, like really fundamental skills. And again, we fully note, and we talked about this on the Tuesday call, that these are requirements, right? But you can elect not to do them, and that's not a problem for you. That's everything we were just saying regarding digital access applies here. Lucy, it is maddening to return to a website and find everything changed, right? So just know that I think one of the elements of digital literacy is problem solving, and so maybe that would apply into that. But just note that this is where we are right now, is really trying to figure out what the problem statements will be. And it's too early really to bring them back, but it will be something akin to definition of a basic, or it might be something akin to a definition of inadequate basic digital literacy skills. Just as we were saying with digital access, we can imagine also some specific subtypes of that, which could be actionable, like able to turn on and utilize a device, unable or able to access the internet and navigate to critical applications, right? So that's all stuff that we're figuring out. This is why it's like a philosophical existential conversation for a little while. We just want to note that we cannot use at this time, we haven't found a pathway forward based on precedent to use low digital literacy, medium digital literacy, or high digital literacy terms, because we know from precedent that we're only able to use those terms if there's some objective standard instrument to apply to it, right? So you'll see in past terminology that we've had like low food insecurity as evidenced by the US food security module, or you can imagine a low psychological stress as evidenced by a low score on the perceived stress scale, right? But without standardized instruments and digital literacy, there's a lot out there. And Adriana, you can pipe in if you want to. We're not likely going to be able to go down that pathway, which is why we're thinking about the skill definition. And Lucy's saying, consider adding to find, evaluate, and update. Thank you, Lucy. And again, in the right now, we have like one listing of the skills on the Confluence. It might be helpful for you all to see all of the different citations with the, I think they actually are 5 different approaches to grouping and defining the skills. There's US Department of Education, there's a blog in EdWeek, there is, another brief from one of our subject matter experts. There's American Library Association, right? So those are the kind of skills that are in the hopper. And then we also are thinking through intersections with health literacy, the digital health literacy element, right? Because this is how it was born, right? We were thinking about health literacy last year and realizing the intersections of digital health with digital literacy. And so we just need to figure out how to solve that problem. That's a big slide, but I didn't want to not bring the complexity of where we are to you all. Because you all are so expert at helping us figure through things and look to some of these terms coming back at the next meeting. Thank you, Tyson. Any comments, any thoughts on this? Lucy, I made something for you. So if you're still here, you can go to the next slide. This is an honor to my friend Lucy. So when we think about those basic skills, right? So I have long ago, especially in housing, I made word clouds, and Lucy always commented on them. So I made one for Lucy today. So these are the things that we know, these skills that we know are in the hopper that we're trying to figure out. Is the ability to turn on and use devices, to find and assess information, to assess and use core internet applications, to communicate by email, text, and portals, right? And assess risks and protect personal information. Again, these are not final. Download information safely. So these are not final, but when you look across the types of skills that are in the literature of digital literacy, these are the types of skills that we see there. So again, we're trying to figure out how, like these basic digital literacy skills, how to build a pathway forward. And you're welcome, Lucy. Any other thoughts on where we are with digital literacy? Again, there's so many references that we are utilizing, lots of wonderful thoughts, and our subject matter experts are all brilliant in this area. So again, hoping to have, and we have the gift of precedent, right? We've been doing this for a while, so the terminology informatics team can kind of try to help ensure that we don't get into a spot where we can't successfully build it into terminology.
Sarah, this may sound really silly, but what does digital mean? Does that mean, what does digital mean? Electronic?
Well, it doesn't just mean electronic, does it? That's a really good question. Adriana, can I lean to you?
I don't think we actually discussed that, so I think that's really great to bring up that topic, but it could also just focus or include technology. But I think definitely us bringing it back to the group to come to consensus on the definition is important.
That's really important.
Yeah, and I do think it's a great point, because after we worked on these definitions, and we looked at some of these questionnaires, I said, I don't know that there's many people out there that, even with a slight definition of digital literacy, that the word digital is all that apparent. And to your point, Lucy, my kids right away said, it's so obvious, but to me, it's not. So I fully agree.
Thank you for thinking about it. And if we stick with this, somewhere we should say why we chose this word, or what else we could have done, or something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It starts to become more apparent when you see, for me, when I look at the skills, I'm like, okay, I know where I am.
Like
Right.
digits evoke numbers. I mean, that's where digits start. But obviously digital literacy skills goes way beyond being able to read numbers or count anything.
Yes. And Mike, I love that you're saying that it feels like it's the most complex. It actually doesn't feel, it feels very familiar. I think that maybe it's just been a while, right? This complexity that we're sitting in right now feels familiar to me as one very deep in it.
Well, that's why we're here. So
Yeah, yeah. This is
somebody
why I
has to do it. It's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it.
No, I know. And Adriana can testify. I think the immensity of the task starts to become apparent to the subject matter experts a few meetings in. So thank you to our subject matter experts for helping us. Very grateful. All right. Yes, Rita, thank you. All right, so we have a few, I think we're going to be able to close up not too late at the top of the hour. Anything else in digital literacy that we want to discuss? Folks understand that we're leaning into to defining some of the skills to help us really help us understand definitions and use cases, and that we really can't go down too far the low, medium, high, because we don't have a standardized scale. So we're thinking about how to organize skills and define critical skills that will be applicable to social care use cases, and we're making progress, I'd say. Denise, nice. All right, next slide, please. So grateful for that really good conversation. Next slide. We're going to go through some instruments. So this is we presented this last time, the eHealth literacy scale. Next slide. This is one of my favorites. This is specifically regarding health literacy, but it's very straightforward. I can use applications, programs like Zoom on my cell phone, computer, or other device on my own without asking for help from someone else. Or I can set up a video chat using my cell phone and computer or another electronic device on my own without asking help from someone else. Or I can solve or figure out how to solve basic technical issues on my own without asking for help for someone else. I just love the elegance of this tool.
Sarah, please consider revising this without asking for help from someone else more than once.
Oh, yeah. So
I mean, when I had to start Zoom, I didn't know where to start. So I asked for help from someone else, and forever after I can Zoom.
But that means now you're digitally health literate, right? That means now, first of all, unfortunately, Lucy, we can't edit the instruments because they're authored, right?
Oh, sorry.
Right. No,
Okay.
no, don't be sorry. And I'm just going to test that because it took you one instance, because you're so smart, Lucy, to move from not having a digital literacy skill to having it, right? So it's not a perpetual problem. So on future instances, you would screen as digitally literate, right?
Well, it's not so much that I'm smart, is that the person who helped me knew exactly what I needed.
Good.
So
I hear what you're saying, though, but yeah, I think in a skill assessment, it would come up as you having the skill in the future, though. That's a good thing. And unfortunately, these are authored tools, so we can ask people to refine them. We're actually meeting with some instrument authors shortly to just noting complexities, but we are a little bound to publish them as they are. Next slide, please. We presented this one last time, long digital health literacy instrument. Next slide. These are all available on the master again. This is the digital health readiness questionnaire for digital literacy. I know how to find helpful and reliable information on the internet. I feel safe when looking at information on the internet, and I feel in control when looking at the information on the internet. Again, these instruments should all be available on the Confluence in time. And you can see how they relate to some of the skills we were talking about. Next slide. This is the digital health readiness questionnaire about learnability. This is Bhumi's not here, but Bhumi was talking about this concept of tech tenacity, right? So this is kind of maybe not necessarily exactly literacy, but it's this idea that you can do it. So we put it in here just to kind of test the waters. And Bhumi, the Wisconsin health literacy expert and brilliant SME in our group, was talking about how this relates to a concept in digital literacy they call tech tenacity, which is really just that you feel like you've got it. Next slide, please. And then this is a really amazing comprehensive assessment from our friends at APCHO regarding specifically looking at digital literacy with new language learners. But there's a lot of really amazing questions. And this is an instance, Lucy, where since we know the authors so well, it's our friends at APCHO, we really can imagine gleaning possibly a smaller set of questions that could become a brief tool from this one, because we work with our colleagues at APCHO all the time. So in this instance, if we pick really good questions, I bet we can make it so. Does that sound good? All right, so next slide, please. Next slide. And then next slide. This is where we have put things into the ecosystem and gotten feedback. This is shifting from our identification work with digital literacy and digital access, moving into what we call evaluation and identify work, right? So we've learned things. Next slide. Oh yeah, so Tom, before we move on, I just want to note some things that have happened in the chat that I missed because I was thinking about Lucy. There is an element of distinguishing reliable sources of information in digital literacy. There's definitely a skill there. And then, so yes, that is definitely a facet that you can see when you look at the skill matrix. And then, okay, perfect. And then this is the update again, Lucy, thank you so much. So we're revising our coordination definition. So we offered last time coordination definition of process of deliberately organizing activities and sharing information to achieve safer and more effective care. And so we've updated it from our patient voice and patient perspective with an aligned with patient preferences statement. And we're just going to make sure that that meets purposes or needs to be further refined. How are we doing, Lucy and Janice? Does this seem like a better definition at all?
Looks good to me, thanks.
Of course. Thank you for your wisdom, as always. Anyone else have thoughts?
Important to be aligned with patient preferences. So yes, great.
Thank you, Janice. Okay, any other thoughts before we move on? Again, we'll vote on this eventually, but it's just going to kind of be re-socialized all the time. Okay, next slide. This one is one that came through our own self-assessment. We are involved in this really work to audit our applicability and sensitivity to non-clinical spaces, right? So there definitely was a clinical orientation when we started, early 2019, but really to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of our social care partners, we noted that the referral definition was fairly clinical centric, and long before, without any further input, we want to offer a change. This is a definition from the Cambridge Dictionary. It's in the ecosystem, and the previous definition was the act of clinicians and providers sending or directing a patient to healthcare professionals and or programs for services. So there's a bunch of problems in there from an inclusive perspective. Clinicians, providers, patient versus client versus person, referring to healthcare professionals as opposed to social care professionals, right? So there's a lot of reasons why that definition is problematic. So the definition from the Cambridge Dictionary is so simple and inclusive. We would like to propose it as an option to replace the other one. Any thoughts? Does it seem so obvious?
Is directing the right verb, the act of offering someone to do something? Directing can be pretty directive. So is that what you intend by referral?
I think it might be right, because offering, something about offering, having been in this space in the actual social service end, you could offer somebody a resource and that resource doesn't exist anymore, or it's filled up. So directing is helping or guiding, something like that. Guiding might be another term of direction in this.
Guiding is so gentle and nice.
Yeah, guiding is good.
Yeah.
And
it's so
this
intentional. Sorry. Hi, Mike.
Hi, this may be the clinician in me as well, but it feels like maybe most, if not all of the time, when you are making a referral, whether for medical or social care, you do have a direction in mind. You have a destination in mind.
Yeah.
And that's why the directing word seems okay. I think this is a much better definition than we had before. If we can, and I don't care as much about keeping the word directing. I think it's okay, but I like the definition overall, much better.
And maybe the solution would just be to look back at the original definition that's up above and just add the words sending or directing.
There you go. That's a good idea. Okay, so we'll put it in the hopper and bring it back next time. These are just going to be kind of like stewing as we work. But I'm glad people feel like it's a good direction to go. And this is, again, a self-audit. And Mike, this came out of the thing that, the thoughts we're having about just trying to do better across the ecosystem, as you're aware. I'm very grateful for our social care partners for holding us accountable.
Do we need to clarify that when we're talking about referral here, we are talking about helping a patient or a client, like for those of you on the call who know about 360X, referral means I'm a doctor and I'm sending information to a specialist. That's referral. So do we need to be clear? I don't want to introduce complexity here where we don't need to, but referral has a much narrower meaning at times. So we want to be sure that people don't think that's what we're talking about.
There's so many things in the comparison of standards between 360X and what's coming through from HL7 that will need to be reconciled at some point. But I guess my vision for all of that would be that when this gets revised and when the 360X work comes more clearly alongside the HL7 work, we can reconcile some of that out. I don't think we can sort of anticipate all of those harmonization issues right now.
Also, we do want to build spaces for social care entities to refer to other social care entities for problems without the involvement of a clinician.
Well, and that will be some of the discussion about extending the 360X, I think, as time goes on.
And I think we want a definition that includes those possibilities, right? If we're taking time to revise it. And even in my clinic, it's often a layperson, a community health worker referring to a community-based organization, right? So so I hope our definition can be the lighthouse for that work.
Rita, I'm sorry, Rita has a great verb here, supporting, the act of directing, and supporting the individual to access or obtain. That would then include everything I was just thinking about 360X, but it would make explicit that first you want to direct or guide someone, and then you want to help them, because when they get there, no one's going to do anything until they have the record.
So to clarify with this, would that, adding that as an updated definition, would that then kind of specifically include kind of the navigation support activities to ensure
Yeah.
it's
Definitely.
resulting in a connection to whatever service or support, whether it's connected to a medical specialist or a social service provider.
So how do we differentiate the referral from coordinate? Is that coordinate? Because that could also be contained within coordination, correct?
Yeah, here's Sarah, at least with the work we're doing in Michigan, we have used the term referral as a more inclusive term, but we've created two different types of referral. One is specifically for assessment and coordination. Another is for specific services that we're seeing maybe coming as a second wave of work after an assessment's made. So I think that this term, as it's written here, accommodates both functions without and is concise enough so that it can probably subsume some more roles as we get more sophisticated about how we move people from helper to helper or do stuff. So this is, I think, a really good next step. I'm not sure we need to wordsmith it much further, because as we do more work on the community side to figure out these care models, we're going to probably get a lot more insight about what this means.
And the good thing about this one, as it stands, is it actually has a reference.
Yeah.
Right. So when we think about, like, I can cite a reference for it, which when we think about semantics becomes really important in building things. Okay, so we're going to put it in the hopper a little bit and come back, but ever so important. So number one, it sounds like universal understanding that this needs to change. The one that was there was not good. some tension regarding, different use cases for different types of referrals and intersections between navigation and referral. But are we okay with putting those in the hopper and I can come back next time and represent it? Sounds like, given that there's no vote right now, we're mulling.
This is so much better than what was there before, so definitely the right direction.
Wonderful. And Jonathan, just thank you for your statement. I just want to note that some unpopular opinions in this, or they're actually popular opinions in this crowd, so. You're in good company. Next slide, please. All right, and then there's no change here, but I did, and this is, I have to honor, let me just make sure that, Teresa, you're still here. I owed you an email. I did not send it. I have to apologize. I'm gonna make this statement formally. Teresa, you made a comment on, I think in the chat regarding, that I never responded to in the last meeting regarding when adjustment happens. So adjustment can happen by the paper and by design, both at the initial intervention, like I can adjust my plan knowing it's not going to work for a patient right when I start it, right? This is really common again in medication selection or medication dosing or in referral patterns with transportation insecurity, like not doing what I want to do or what I think is best for the patient or what would normally happen because I'm just making room for social risks. And there's all kinds of inequities in that statement noted, right? But so it can either happen at the initial time, but it also can happen in reassessment, right? So the adjustment activity is not bound to either initial or post-assessment. It can happen at any point of time. And you raised a comment on that in the chat and I didn't get back to it. So does that make sense? All right, and this one is like, it sounds like this one's a no-brainer. Our dear friends of the Academy reviewed this one. So far there's not too much thought about this one. Again, the TEP for this paper thought about it a long time. So once we get to the voting time, we can put this one through. Next slide, please. Next slide, here we are, a little early. So homework, again, catch up with as needed materials and recordings. Listserv, updates to Sarah B. Where are we at with that? I think we're built, that's to come. I just put Sarah Bahal on the spot. She'll try to unmute and talk. Most importantly, brilliant friends, please submit digital access and digital literacy concepts. We have a few more meetings regarding the identification phase, and then we move on to collective end-to-end review. You can find those master lists on the Confluence. Again, they're going to be published tomorrow at 5 p.m. Sarah Bahal saying that's in progress. She didn't even have to come off mic. This is a really wonderful meeting. It is such an honor to be back with you all again and your brilliant minds, like coming from all the different perspectives. This is partly what creates like the robust nature of our work. So just very, very grateful. Next slide, please. And our meetings. See you here in 2 weeks' time. Please join the technical work stream Wednesdays from 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time. Again, that's where they're looking at some of the new use case. So wonderful to have you there. Join Civitas and the Gravity team with all of our friends at the pilot work stream, which is the last Thursday of each month, 2:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All of those meetings are on the calendar at 8 till 7. And thank you, friends. Any final thoughts before we let folks go on this lovely Thursday evening? It was a great call. So grateful for all of you.
Thank you.
Travel safe to your clients in the woods, Sarah.
I will.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, friends.